Hello friends, in the discussion that we had on the system approach, we talked about the various characteristics of a system, and now is the time for us to understand how MIS, Management Information System, can also be approached as a system. It can also be studied as a system. It actually is a system, and let us now find out how it actually is a system, right? And while I use this word system, basically I am referring to the system approach, the system theory that we have discussed in the last session. Now please understand what happens in an MIS, Management Information System. There are so many different components of an MIS. The data is processed into information. So this can be seen here with this diagram. The data is being processed into information, and the processed data is also stored for future use also. So that is why you see this double-headed arrow. And many a times what happens is during the processing, the stored data is also made use of. So that is why you see the storage here. This is basically the database. So many a times the processing which happens and the results go to the database, and many a times during the processing the data which is stored in the database, that is also made use of, right? So MIS is a system which basically, now have a look at this. This is the MIS system, and this is the input to the MIS system, and this is the output of the MIS system. The information is the output, the data is the input. Now we have seen that in the system approach, we have seen that a system comprises of various subsystems, and that when all systems work together well, then only the system is going to work well, and these subsystems are also related to each other. Now we have to study MIS using this particular system approach, system philosophy. We have to understand how MIS is also a system. So I have given you the first instance why MIS can be called a system. Here the data is the input and the output is the information, and this is what goes inside the system, right? Now the functional subsystems of MIS. Now let us have a look at the functional subsystems. Every system has got to have a subsystem. Subsystems actually made up, they actually make a system. So a system is made up of subsystems. So if we talk about the functional subsystems, then we have got the hardware, the software, the data communication, and the database. So these are the functional subsystems which make up the MIS. If you do not have the hardware or the software or the communication devices or the database, your MIS would not be able to function well. So these are the functional subsystems. If you look at MIS from the functional perspective, then you will find that these subsystems are there. The hardware, software, data communication, and all of them are related to each other. Many hardwares can't function without these softwares, and the hardware and software together will generate some data. The data would be entered, and this data will then be stored in the database. So in that sense, all these subsystems are interrelated, and until and unless all of them work smoothly, the MIS would also not be able to work well. So for MIS to be effective, you have to ensure that all these subsystems are also working smoothly. Now if you talk about from the application perspective, what are the application subsystems? So this is basically from different perspectives. If you are talking about the functional perspective, we are talked about the subsystems as hardware, software, communication devices, and database. So these would be the subsystems of MIS from the functional perspective. But from the application perspective, we are going to talk about the various subsystems that make up the MIS application. So these are the various subsystems. We have read about many of them. We have talked about the office automation system. We have talked about the transaction processing system. We have had a detailed discussion about the decision support system and the executive information system. We talked about the knowledge-based systems. DSS in itself is a knowledge-based system, and then we have read about the expert systems, which are again basically knowledge-based systems. So from the application point of view, these are the subsystems. Now what is the inquiry processing system? Inquiry processing subsystem basically will process the customer inquiry. When, for example, if you want to find out how much money is left in your account, what you can do is you can access the website of the bank, and you can create a login account there. You can log into that account and then you can enter some values to find out how much money is left in your account. So this is what inquiry processing system does, right? So you can basically inquire something and the inquiries would be processed and the responses would be given by the system. So this is basically automating the customer inquiry. So the customer inquiry resolution process is getting automated here. Fine. So this you might have seen, as I gave an example of banks. Likewise in telecom firms also you have this kind of an inquiry processing system, right? So these are the subsystems from the application point of view, right? From different point of view we have got different subsystems of MIS. And now if you look at MIS from the organizational function perspective, you would find that there are some other kind of subsystems. So these are the subsystems. The production information system is one subsystem which actually forms the MIS. So one of the subsystem of MIS is the production information subsystem. Likewise we'll have one subsystem for HR function, one for marketing, one for logistics, one for supply chain planning and supply chain management. So these are different subsystems of the MIS from the organizational function perspective, right? So basically MIS will be integrating the organizational functions. So MIS will do what? It will integrate the organizational functions. For example, we have got the production information subsystem, which is some kind of an MIS meant only for the production department, and that is why it is considered to be a subsystem of MIS. And the information that it could generate would be regarding the product target versus how much has been achieved, what is the progress in terms of target achievement, what are the inventory levels. Now this could be a information reporting system wherein we are getting information about the inventory levels, and when the inventory levels have reduced to a point where the inventory, another lot needs to be reordered. So all these things, and there are so many other things which are covered. I'll only be giving you some examples of what all things have to be covered, what all things can be covered by these subsystems. So this is, for example, there could be a information reporting system for the various accidents that have taken, for the various quality issues that have come up. So there could be a number of such applications, right? Then we have got the marketing information system, MIS. Marketing information system, here we can keep a track of sales versus achievement, and then we can also further find out the sales volume brand wise and product wise and area wise, and this will give the management personnel better idea of how well the product is selling in different parts of the country or different areas, or how well the brands are selling, which is the highest selling brand and which one is a laggard brand in terms of not getting sold. So all this information would be provided in the marketing information subsystem and the various reports generated here, right? Again, then we have got an MIS only for the human resource, and that particular MIS is known as the human resource information subsystem. For example, it can keep a record of the skill inventory, number of the different kind of skills available with the employees working in the organization. And likewise, there can be so many things that can be recorded, and the data regarding which can be stored here in the human resource information subsystem. Then we have got the finance information subsystem. Ideally it is a subsystem basically. Here we can keep a track of asset liability positions. There are so many other things which we can keep a track of. For example, in the finance information system, again we can have an expert system which can help us choose the best projects for purpose of investment. And I think we have discussed this particular example while talking about the expert systems. So that would be a part of the finance information system. Here we are talking about the asset liability position. Now this is one thing that the banks keep on monitoring on a regular basis. So their finance information system will certainly have this particular, will certainly be providing this particular report or this particular information. What is, how many assets are there with the bank as of now, and what is the liability. Asset should always be greater than the liability. So this is the information that can be obtained from the finance information system. And then we can have the logistic information system, which can take care of the information regarding the shipment of goods, the sending and receiving of goods. So all this information would be provided by the logistic information system. So all of them, when they combine, then they actually make up the MIS, the management information system, for the whole organization. While these are basically information systems for particular departments, and that is why they are considered to be subsystem of the MIS. They are subsystems because of this. Is this okay? So this is just an indicative list. There are so many such uses of these kind of information systems. For example, I can keep a track on the attrition rate through the HRIS, Human Resource Information System. I can keep a track on the seasonal changes in the demand pattern through the marketing information subsystem, right? So I can do a lot of things. So this is just an indicative list. And if you have to categorize MIS from the organizational function perspective, then these are the various categories in which you can actually divide MIS. So we have got production and marketing and human resource, finance and logistic information systems, right? And since they constitute the MIS, they can be called to be the subsystem of the MIS, of the management information system, right? Now let us talk a little bit about the stakeholders, system stakeholders as far as MIS is concerned. Now who are the system stakeholders? They are also known as information workers because they deal with information. Either they are collecting the information, either they are collecting the data which has to be then converted to information, or they are analyzing the data to convert it into information, or they are making use of the information. So they are all going to be called the information workers. They do what? Please have a look. They create, collect, then process, distribute and use information. So they create information, they collect the information, they process it, and they, after processing, after analyzing, they get a finding. So that finding is a new creation in itself. An information is getting created, then they distribute it to the users, right? And the users use it. So these information workers do all these different kind of tasks. So a particular information worker would at least be doing one of these tasks. He would either be creating the information, or collecting it, or processing it, or distributing it, or using it. So all these would be information workers. Now have a look at the different types of information workers that we have. These system owners. Now who are the system owners? Who own the system? They provide the resources so that the system could be set up, so that the system could be installed, and so that the system could run smoothly. They are people from non-technical background, and they are generally managers, the CEO and the head of the department, the divisional heads, who are system owners. They own it, and they are the ones who actually, they own it on behalf of the company actually. So they are responsible for ordering the installation of a particular system. They are responsible for modification in that system. So in that sense they own it. They own it on behalf of their organization. So they make all such decisions regarding the system, and that is why they are said to be owning the system, right? And then we have the system analyst. Now who is a system analyst? Now system analysis does what? It studies the organizational needs and determines how MIS can solve the various business problems that the organization is facing, right? So it studies the organization needs. To study the organization needs, it talks to the employees, it gathers information from the employees. It may also need to talk to the customers or the suppliers to understand the organization need in a more comprehensive fashion. He may want to talk to the CEO also. He may talk to the shop floor employee also, just to have an in-depth understanding of what all requirements are there in the organization, and how an MIS, a management information system, can better serve the organizational requirements, right? And now the most important task of this system analyst is basically, he or she is a bridge between the system owner and system user. So we have discussed system owners. Here are the system users who are going to actually use the system to obtain, generate information, and to make decisions. So the system owners and the system users, these are people who are from the non-technical background. So and then there are people who are system designers and system builders. They are people from the technical background. So analyst is well versed in both the skills. He's also having the technical background, just like the system designer and system builders. He also has a very good understanding of the customer requirements, and he basically acts as a bridge. He communicates the user requirements, which are expressed in layman terms, to the system designer in technical terms, so that the system designer can then accordingly design the system to satisfy all the user requirements or the owner requirements, right? So in that sense, they play a very, very important role. They are the bridge between the SOSU, system owner, system user, and the system designer and system builder. And then we have got the system designer. Now, what does the system designer do? Please understand that system analyst is basically collecting information from the owners and users, and then it is providing this information to the system designer. And system designer basically is getting the information input from the system analysts, and based on that he will be designing the system. So the system designer does what? He designs the IS based information system based on the inputs given by the system analyst, right? And these inputs have been given in technical terminology, because system analyst has converted the layman language used by the owner and the user into technical terminology, right? So this is what the system analyst has done, and this has become an input for the system designer. Now he'll be designing according to the information communicated to him by the system analyst. So for example, what is to be done? Supposing a student applies, for example, you have been applying on the Kumar University website for the coming exams. Now how is the admit card issued to the student, right? So the system analyst would talk to the actual users, to the actual clerical staff, and find out how the admit card is used, how the admit card is issued to these students for the purpose of exam when they have submitted their fee in the Kumar University portal. Now then he will convert this information, which is in layman terms, into technical information. So he might prepare a flow chart, he might prepare some kind of a decision tree for the system designer, and then the system designers would be able to understand the requirement in the technical term, and then accordingly they will design the system, right? So basically system designer is going to provide technical solution to the business needs. What kind of technical solutions do they provide? They provide the database administration kind of a service. They are also network architect, graphic artist, security specialist. All of them are known as system designers. Basically they are involved in designing of the system. Be it the database administrator who will take care of the database, he'll design the database, he'll manage the database, and then he'll also define access to the database, who all would be able to access the database and who all would be able to modify the database. Likewise, there is a network architect naturally which takes care of the communication network, and then there is graphic artist which takes care of the visual part, the images, illustrations used in an information system, and then there are security specialists which ensure safety of the system from some outside attack, deliberate attack, or from some phishing attack, or from some kind of a virus attack. So this is what the system designers do. Please understand that to be able to do the job or to be able to perform the functions assigned to them, they indeed depend on the inputs provided by the system analyst, right? Now once the design has been completed, now the system builders comes in. Now please understand, analyst was one which actually translated the requirement of the user into technical terms, and based on that the system designers have come up with a design of the new management information system, and based on the design which has been given to them, the system builders actually will do what? They will actually construct the system. These are basically the programming personnel. So they are good at programming, they are technically proficient in programming, and they would simply, depending on whatever design has been provided by the system designer, they will be actually building the system. So they would actually build the system, they would actually code, they would actually program, and this way the system would be built. So system builders construct information system based on design specifications, and they implement as well as maintain the information system also. So they also maintain it, so they are also responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of the information system, right? So now we can understand that these three are basically the people with some technical background. If you do not have a technical background, you cannot work as a system analyst or as a designer or a builder. System analyst is basically the bridge between the customer requirements and the system designer, who would require this information to be provided to him in technical terminology. So system analyst would do what? It would understand the customer requirement and provide this information in technical terminology to the system designer. System designer will design the system, and then according to the design, the system builder would be making the various software programs and would be writing the various software codes, programming codes. So this is how the system would get built, and then the maintenance is also part of the system builder. And who are going to be the users of such system? They could be internal users, including the employees of your organization. They could be external users, which could be the customers or the suppliers or some remote user. So some user who is sitting at a very far off place, that person can also access the system and extract the information he wants. So they are external users of the system, of the information system. And the job of the system users is to capture the data, enter the data, validate it, cross-check it before actually giving the data some kind of a finality. So it also has to check for errors in the data, check for inaccuracies in the data, and then what will he do? He will be exchanging this information from the system, and he might also be using this information. So he would be either capturing the data, or he would be only validating the data, or he would be exchanging the data with the information system, or he would be using the data. So these all are system users. As I said, system owners and system users are people from the non-technical background. Right? Fine. So this we have seen here that there are 5 stakeholders involved as far as the information workers are concerned. The system owners and system users are the non-technical personnel involved, while the system analyst, designer and the builder are people with a technical background, right? Now let us take example of what happens in real life. Now for example, when railways implemented the online passenger reservation system, what probably they would have done? First of all, some system analyst would have talked to the people who are making use of the reservation system, be it the booking clerk, be it the clerk at the booking window, be it the customers. He must have talked to all of them, and based on that he would have understood the requirements of the users of the system, and then he would have provided this information to the system designer. System designer would have done what? System designer would have prepared some, maybe a decision tree or maybe a data flow diagram to communicate to the system builder as to what is expected. Based on that flow chart or the data flow diagram, the system builder would have actually written the codes, written the programming codes, and then ultimately the booking clerks and the customers would have used the system. So this is how the whole thing works, right? So with this we are coming to the end of our discussion on unit 3. In this particular unit we talked about the long term and the short term and the middle term planning for information system for MIS. Then we also talked about the systems approach. We got introduced to the systems approach, and then we understood how systems approach is going to be utilized in MIS. Now In this particular session, we also discuss the different types of information workers or system stakeholders and what is their specific responsibility. Now in the unit 4, we are going to move on to the system development life cycle, wherein we are going to talk about different stages in the system development life cycle, and we'll talk a little bit about the design tools that are available with the designers so that they can design the system. And we'll also talk about some of the attributes of the system analyst, those who plan to become system analyst, what all attributes do they need to have. So this will be the discussion in the coming session. Thank you very much.